Hello gobs and welcome back to another episode of RPG Stories. Of course, they're all going to be horror today. Not horror. They're going to be scary. Not like spook you scary, like these people exist scary, okay? So we're going to go on the subreddit, not mine. Mine hasn't been active for a while because stuff, which I'm not going to address. Look, it's been a while since I've been doing this, so if all my recording mannerisms are gone, that's why. But today we are going to go on the subreddit. This might be your first video seeing of me, which, to be fair, would make a lot of sense because I haven't uploaded in a while. But whatever. Today we are going onto the subreddit and we are going to read some RPG horror stories. They're all horror. I don't think there might be a lighthearted one in here. I don't remember. I tried to record this before, but I just wasn't feeling it. So, with the intro out of the way, let's just get into the video. This is RPG Horror Stories, episode 30 maybe? I don't say the episode name, whatever. The title screen appears now. Our first story comes from Eggplant Shoes. An incompetent DM changes the rules and writes the worst plot twist to ever be written. A few years ago, I witnessed a game that wasn't straight up disastrous, but left me incredibly baffled. Our starter, my GF, invited me to spectate on a Cyberpunk Red session that she was about to play. There were 4 players plus DM. Ooh, Cyberpunk Red. I actually know this system. I actually like this system. I think it's kind of dropped for me a little bit, but I still would enjoy playing it if I ever got a chance to run it or play in it. So Cyberpunk Red, pretty good guys. But let's continue on. First thing I learned, the DM, in the middle of the campaign, decided to change the dice rules to homebrew runs for some reason. He never stated as such, but I think he kind of based them on WOD, World of Darkness? Where you have to throw multiple dice, based on your skill level, to determine the amount of successes/fails. However, instead of D10, they threw D6. 1 equals fails, 6 equals success, and everything else did nothing. Even without experience, I could tell this was completely moronic and not tested at all, obviously. It became apparent pretty quickly when the players wanted to have a race on the Badlands. 2 of them had regular cars, 1 had a deck-out nomadic card, and 1 had a bike. Mind you, none of these things were counted in. No modifiers for the type of vehicle, nothing. All that mattered was the rolls on driving. Whoever had the most successes won. That's that. As if to point out the stupidity of the rules, the nomad car guy lost, and he was not happy about it. He ranted a bit about what's the point of spending so much cash on upgrading my car if it doesn't do anything. And hey, he was right. The DM had no idea what to say, so he just skimmed over the situation and kind of skipped to the night, where the true horror begins. The crew set up camps in the Badland and went to bed. Then, in the middle of the night, they were woken up by a loud crash no more than a mile away. Startled, everybody left their tents, and all they could see was a large metallic object, smoking, crashed into the ground. They obviously went to investigate. As they arrive at the scene, the metal thing appears to be some kind of spaceship? They were reasonably taken aback by this, but hey, space travel is much more accessible in CP. Do not abbreviate cyberpunk. Do not abbreviate cyberpunk, okay? Lesson number 1, don't abbreviate cyberpunk. That's it. Maybe one of those moon cruisers crashed into the ground, and surely it's not something DM put in there because he recently saw the new Alien movie. Very non-subtle foreshadowing there. The crew entered the ship, split into 2 pairs, 1 per floor, and began to explore it. And it was so boring. The DM had a pre-made map of the ship, like a dozen rooms on 2 floors, and only a few of them had loot and nothing else. The players also had no idea what they were looking for, so they just aimlessly walked around collecting random weapons or scrap parts for like an hour and a half. As they finally started to complain, suddenly 1 pair gets attacked by aliens? There were 2 of them, and they basically looked like head crabs from Half-Life, but also kind of worked like the monster from The Thing. A fight ensued and the players were losing, not only because of the terrible dice rolls, but also because the aliens could regenerate for bullets and katana cuts like it's nothing. Meanwhile, the other pair were still investigating the rooms until they also found a room that triggered the alien attack on their floor. Fantastic. After like 30 minutes of useless fighting, someone metagamed a bit and just used fire, which, to nobody's surprise, worked like a charm. Who would have thought? Which the DM gave some hints about this, but hey, whatever. By then, I was incredibly relieved I'm only spectating this and not playing, because I was constantly zoning out with how dragged out it was. The players didn't hide their unamusement either. Not straight up complaining, but kinda just doing whatever to get these horrendous fights over with. I think around that time I went AFK to make myself some food, and by the time I came back, the crew was leaving the spaceship because they were really beaten up and had a lot of cool loot on them. And then, the disaster struck. The final boss of this horror story came. The DM began to narrate the whole crew waking up in their tents because it was all a effing dream. A group dream, apparently, which isn't that far-fetched in Cyberpunk if they were all doing like brain dances and they didn't know they were all in a brain dance. They could all wake up from the same brain dance. Is that how that works? I'm sure there's some Cyberpunk thing that lets that work, like some type of experimental group brain dance device, but you know, it's not that far-fetched in Cyberpunk. But like this, yeah, definitely. Everyone was dumbfounded as the DM wrapped up the session. Finally, someone probed about all the loot they collected, since it was incredibly unfair that they spent so much time for nothing. The DM, somehow, didn't expect this to come up, and after some thinking, he just reluctantly let the players keep the loot, which was obviously a whole plot hole on its own for a reason I don't need to explain. It's all basically sounded like he had no idea what he was doing from start to finish and just wanted a sci-fi adventure. Midway realized no one was enjoying it and that it also made no sense in the CP setting and just retconned it in the most stupidest way possible. Anyway, I hope it was at least entertaining to read because it was miserable to witness. And they were right, good thing they were only spectating and not playing it. This sounds like an absolute chore. You can have D6 be your primary dice for rolling and have it work. Except in most systems that use D6 for rolling, 3 belows fail, 4 above is success, instead of just 1 or 6 trying to land a crit on a D6. It's very, it's not that unlikely since it is a D6 compared to a D20, but still you're going to have a lot of misses. Because wait, if 1 is a miss and 2 to 5 do nothing and 6 is a success, doesn't that just mean 5 belows just fail? If you're not succeeding, you're not doing the task. I guess that the fails hurt the players, and then the in between the 2 through 5, I guess if that literally just does nothing, like nothing happens, and then 6 is you do the thing you do, then I guess that still sucks. That just feels like 5 below is just a miss. That's all it is. 5 below is a miss in this dice system. So yeah, the dice system in Cyberpunk Red is already fine enough. You don't need to homebrew in your own rules. I don't know why you want to do that without running it by your players first. I mean, if you run it by your players first and they all agree to it, then more power to you. But if you're just gonna spring it up on them out of nowhere, then no, don't do that. Check with your players before you change the primary rolling system for your games before you implement it. Unless, you're trying to catch them by surprise or something, or if it's a one-off session, then you can surprise them. But, if you're trying to play a campaign and you do this, then that's not going to be the best. And then finally, they have an Alien TTRPG, boom, cover. So if you really want to play Alien, you can go and play that instead of, Aliens in Cyberpunk could work, because Cyberpunk is a science fiction setting. So having aliens show up can kind of work. It could be a thing that the corps were trying to keep a secret. So it should be like a slow review, or if you're actually going to get something out of exploring the metal UFO, we're just going to call it a UFO. So, but that's my input on it. Just run things by your players, and that's basically all I have to say. The writer summed it up pretty well at the end there, so what more can I add to it? Let's move on. Our next story comes from Red Hood 101101. Is that stand for LOL? Who knows? I always enslaved you. Why won't you date me? Essay warning. Putting a general essay warning for the story. While nothing like that happened, some elements get eerily close. TLDR, my PC died, another player revived him as their undead slave, and then hits on me. In college, I made the mistake of joining the school's D&D club to try and make some friends. I have a few other bad stories from this club, but this one was definitely the worst and the one that made me quit. The club had like 100-ish members, and every week you got lumped in with 3 to 4 random strangers and a DM for an adventure. 100 members in a D&D club. That sounds insane. I mean, at that point, you might as well just do Pathfinder League or something similar, which is probably what they did, maybe? I don't know. But 100 members in a D&D club sounds absolutely crazy. I mean, some people have a hard enough time trying to find groups, and just 100 other people here. Oh, I don't know, that's just a crazy number. Look, I came from a small town, okay? So 100 people wanting to play D&D, it just seems crazy to me. But moving on. I've been playing for a few weeks, so my character was level 3 at this point, and I was assigned to a group with another girl and 2 guys. One was normal, one was that guy. That guy, through the session, kept staring at me and was just giving some weird vibes, which I wrote off because we're all awkward nerds here. At the end of the adventure, my character died in combat, and everyone was pretty sympathetic about it, except that guy who offered me a deal. He would bring my character back to town and pay to have them revived if I promised to do anything he wanted until I paid off his debt, with emphasis on the anything part. I was feeling uncomfy at that and tried to politely decline, which he responded with, "Okay, in that case, I'll get a throw away debt or make you my unveiled slave for all eternity. So don't worry, your character will live on." Again, mildly uncomfortable at the idea, but at this point I just want to go back to my dorm and forget about this stupid club, and no one else at the table seemed to notice or care. Come on, guys, read the rooms. I don't care if you're a nerd, okay? I mean, some people, they don't have the mental wherewithal to recognize social situation, but still, I mean, out of 4 people, somebody should have noticed, right? Maybe not. I don't know. I don't get out a lot, can you tell? We all pack up and leave, and that guy starts to head in the same direction as me and reveal he lives in the dorm across from mine. Great. During this walk, he stares at me directly in the eyes and whips out, "Has anyone ever told you about how beautiful you are?" I just said no and sped walked the rest of the way, hoping he would get the hint. Instead, he sped up and started to ask about how I wanted to handle my character now that I was working for him. I said I didn't care, made it to my door, and decided maybe not to go back to the D&D club. And that is the end of our story. Oh, this poor player. I'm so sorry that happened to you. First of all, guys, take a hint. Girl says no, they mean it. Don't know. Oh, they're playing hard to get. Especially after you try to do this to their character in a game. I mean, so it's a fantasy game, but that excuse doesn't cut for awkward behavior outside the table, okay? Don't be creepy. I don't have much to say. I mean, that just feels like a general life lesson a lot of people should know by now. Just don't be creepy. If a girl's trying to get walk away, don't chase after them trying to. I hope they went to somebody about this, or the guy ended up leaving them alone, especially since it's in college. So that means anywhere from 2 to 4 years, maybe even more. So hopefully they didn't have to keep interacting with them. You know, that would be so awkward after all of that, and then you would have to see them every time you leave the dorm to go to your classes. I mean, not every time, but you know what I mean. That would just be so awkward, and then that would just invite more trouble. Why'd you leave the club? Oh, I hate the thought of it. So I hope they made it out safe and okay, and that guy ended up leaving the OP alone. And with that, we'll move on to our final story. Our last story comes from Kukmindu, the Oblivious player. About a year ago, I started putting together a campaign for Fantasy Age. The players, most of whom were close friends, who joined hadn't played it before, so I gave them a couple weeks before we started to formalize themselves with the rule. Maybe that person was right about grammatically checking these stories before I read them. But I like the surprise. I like getting the reaction, the innate reaction from me, instead of like reading the story and then having to. I don't like phoning things or making things up, but whatever. Maybe it's my reading skills and not the writing. About a year ago, I started putting together a campaign for Fantasy Age. The players, most of whom were close friends, who joined hadn't played it before, so I gave them a couple of weeks before we started to familiarize themselves with the rulebook. One of the players, whom I will call Thorn, was a mutual acquaintance of mine. All the other players knew him a bit better than myself. I had always found him a bit odd in my few interactions with him. Whenever a specific topic was being talked about, he would check out of the conversation and randomly interject with something completely unrelated. A couple of examples. A bit before session 0, I was talking about basic mechanics with a couple of others, and he joined in the conversation by asking us to define Porky Pig. Another instance that stood out a few years ago, as we were just casually talking about who knows what, He stated that he had just recently learned that Winnipeg, Canada, where he's apparently from, was not in the UK. Weird dude, but harmless. Anyway, as Session 0 got close, I reached out to the players to make sure they got the basics, and I never got a response from him. Session 0 comes, and most players have a vague idea of what they want to do, and we start building characters as I introduce the setting. He arrives an hour later, this will become a trend, with a full character sheet. I look it over, and it showed Drow as his race and a class and subclass that does not exist in Fantasy Age, let alone D&D. He had to use ChatGPT to fill it out and never looked at the rulebook. I sent everyone a Google Doc with everything in it. As Session 0 progresses, he doesn't participate beyond picking Elf and Mage as his race and class. I had to end things around 10 PM when he still hadn't rolled his stats, let alone named his character or chosen arcana or spells for himself. So I figured I'll work with him one-on-one the next day when I'm off work. That never happened as he didn't respond to his phone. The day before Session 1, I talked to the player, we'll call Princess, related to her backstory, to see if she could knock some sense into him, and from there we made slow progress. I chose Arcana for him. For anyone unfamiliar with Fantasy Age, think of them as different schools of magic, fire, ice, shadow, healing, etc., and got him to at least pick out spells from the options I presented. Session 1 arrives, and he arrives an hour late again, and with a somewhat presentable character sheet. He still needed a name and a quit, but I figured we'll fill them in as they come up because I just wanted to move things along. As the campaign starts, he's quiet for a good chunk of time, and when the party sets off on the first task, he speaks up and says he wants to go fishing. This will be the case for the rest of the campaign. He shows up an hour late and has his PC split up from the rest of the group to roleplay fishing. That's it. He did fill in a name by Session 3 at least, it being some dumb sex joke, whatever, I'll take it. The campaign ended after 4 total sessions. Right after Session 4, infighting broke out between 3 other players for reasons unrelated to the game. I could get into the whole mess, but that would make this post far too long. Maybe as a second post if there's any interest, I might be interested. There might be a second post. I got these stories months ago. If you couldn't tell, I mean, someone probably already read them, but whatever, let's talk about this player. It just sounds like someone who didn't have a grasp of wanting to play in this system or this campaign. When you talk with people, you should make sure that they're actually interested in. I mean, if a player is interested, they should want to sit down and make a character sheet instead of using ChatGPT or some other way to fill out this character sheet. You should want to have some type of interested, and this player just doesn't seem interested. From not wanting to fill out the character sheet for like 3 sessions, all the little details in that should be done like Session 1 at least. I mean, there are some things like building a history as you go along, yes, that makes sense, but your primary stuff should already be done by Session 1 for the most part. It depends on your campaign, depends on your system, but from a general, your character sheet should mostly be done by Session 1. And then they just wanted to roleplay fishing. It just really sounds like this guy didn't want to play in this type of campaign. He just wanted to do his own thing, which role-playing fishing could work. I mean, if you have a fisher who's addicted to fishing, that could work, but if you're being a hindrance to the party, then maybe not. Again, you guys know your players before I do, so make sure you check with them and make sure everyone is interested. That's simple. I mean, I don't have anything else to say. I mean, showing up late was also a red flag. I wouldn't exactly kick this guy out, but they did try to talk to him, and it seems like it didn't work. So yeah, maybe don't invite him back. That's just so rude. Talk to them and to ask them if they actually wanted to keep playing. But that's what I would do, and that's our story for today. What a weird conclusion. This doesn't sound any better than the first time I recorded this, but, at least I'm actually giving advice this time. Last time I was like, blah, 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 whatever. So, that is our stories for today. Thank you to all the posters for posting these stories on the subreddit. And remember, I have my own subreddit. You can post any kind of RPG story, and all my other social media is in the description below. Thank you for watching, and if you want to see more RPG content like this, well, subscribe. And check out my channel trailer for all the other type of content I upload. So, I hope you gobs, is that what I say? Have a lob of a day. May your adventures be free from crappy people. Haven't done that in a while. That was actually pretty fun.